but flying the ship, that all the switches worked. Not only was it a practical cockpit with functional everything, it was set in the volume, which is this digital screens that surround the sets. And so I'm looking out a real cockpit and I'm surrounded by space, and all the stars are just kind of like floating, like this. And then when I say jumping to hyperspace now, like all the stars, stretch to infinity, just like in the films.
What's going on, Star Wars fans?
Hello there.
This is going to be the third and final interview with Chris Bartlett. Man, I've had a great time interviewing him. He has really cool stories, and his experience is so awesome. It's pretty cool. So let's not waste any time and finish up this interview with Chris Bartlett. So before we wrap this up, I wanted to ask you a couple quick questions, if you wouldn't mind,
Okay.
in reference to this universe. So
Okay.
what would be your favorite Star Wars movie?
For me, it was episode 4,
Okay.
because that was the first one I saw, and I couldn't I couldn't put into words how exciting it made my life after that point. Even when it's just, when there was no promise of another one, uh, I had these figures, and me and my friends would play in the shag carpet in my living room or out in the backyard, and we're making up our own stories. And it just, everybody had, the big evil guy and the
Right.
moisture farmer.
Right.
But what about
Right.
the
The
power
pilot and the
droid
co-pilot and
and
the protocol
Snaggletooth or
droid.
whatever?
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
what's their story? We don't know that story, but we feel like we have a little bit of a template to tell our own stories with other characters. So that, and I mean, the props felt so relatable. They felt like real things. It didn't feel like Flash Gordon kind of,
Right.
or Star Trekky. Nothing against Star Trek. I mean, I'm just
Right.
saying they felt like real, like they could have been real because they were based on real things.
Right. Well, and I
So
think
that was
that's
my
that was really cool. Again, going back to that, some of those battle scenes, when you watch them now, they look just as good.
yes,
It's
yeah.
insane from the 70s and 80s what George Lucas did with that, and
It
these
felt,
dog fights, and some of them now look just as good, which is
even
crazy.
fighting in the trenches and stuff. Like
Yeah.
he based all that stuff on World War II, not only footage but also films. So like it was all looked real, and so for me, and then the story of a kid who was relatable, someone who was like a little bit older than me, and you know that he had such an impact on this universe. When he came from being nobody.
Right.
That was really cool. Plus, the bad guys looked so great.
Right. Yeah.
Like, wow, I want to know more about this. This big dark cloaked character. Like, where did he come from? How did he get like that? What is he? Is he a robot? Anyway, it just,
Yeah.
there were so many questions. I really also loved that it was set in a story that had a bunch of history to it, that they weren't trying to explain everything that happened, that to bring us up to speed. Like, I love
Right.
that we were just plopped in the middle of a story, go, this is what's happening right now, but there's a whole bunch you don't know. Like, that was a cool feeling too. I'm like, it really drew me in.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
awesome. And it is, and it's expanded now, which is awesome, which I think is really cool. But if you go back to that OG film there, a New Hope, and now, when we got the prequels, we were able to see how he became,
Sure.
Darth Vader. And then, I don't know if you do any of the reading, but these the new books, From a Certain Point of View,
Uh-huh.
they're
I
so
have
cool
that.
because they have these little stories from each of the first OG films,
Yeah.
and they're characters, sort of like who you play, but we get to hear what's going on in your mind or what you're thinking about,
Right.
off that scene, that
From a
character
certain
where,
point of view.
yeah,
Right.
which I think is really cool. And again, as we've, gone back into the prequels, and you got to see Mustafar and how he turned
Yeah.
into that, and who he was as a little boy, and all these things.
Yeah.
And then you have the Clone Wars and Rebels, which bring and tell a little bit more stories and a little bit more background to some of these characters that we've grown up with and we love, and now we're getting to learn a little bit more about them, which I think is really
Yeah.
neat. So
Yeah. I think, the plausibility of how he came to the dark side seemed, I mean, it seemed plausible. Like
sure,
if you take someone who's been had such a hard life, and then they feel like they're just making it, they're just finally, after so long of enduring, they finally get some, like they're getting some attention, or they feel like they're worthy of something, or they feel like I'm learning and I'm progressing, and then you take it all away,
right,
like where they didn't do anything to, necessarily from a certain point of view, didn't do anything to damage or elicit taking all that away, but it was taken away from him by people who wanted to do him harm. Like you would feel very upset,
yeah, and do
and
and do almost anything
almost
to
anything,
get
right?
that person that was maybe taken away from you, or this life or this world that was taken away
Yes.
from you. Oh, absolutely. I think
I mean, it
everybody
seemed
can see
very,
that.
yeah,
And I think
yeah,
that's why Darth Vader is such a huge character, even though he's so evil. I mean, he's the guy you love to hate,
right.
because again, it's just that you know the story, and it's like, okay, that could be me, which is
And
cool.
right. And now, even in the new show, where this last episode was so good,
Yeah.
seeing him come back and seeing
Oh my gosh.
flashes of him, like,
Yeah.
oh gosh,
Yeah, they
it
did
was
such a
really
good
great.
job with that. It
So
was such a good
yes,
job. So speaking of
yeah,
characters, your favorite
yeah.
Star Wars character?
This guy,
Okay.
as a kid,
Yep.
as a kid,
Yep.
this guy, because he was so mysterious, but he had so many cool accessories, and he looked cool. He had a great voice. Back then, it was Jason Wingreen, but later it was Tamara Morrison. But he just looked so cool that I wanted to know more about him. And he had so few lines
Oh
that it
yeah.
just added to his mystery. So later, when I got to see the concept art for this distinguished gentleman,
Yes.
um, and saw that he was a bounty hunter when I was, excuse me, used to playing a droid, I was really excited because it's not this guy, but somebody, he already exists.
Right.
We need someone new who feels like him, but also is something that I could do myself without impersonating, another person. That I could make this character my own for this universe. And Ron, as you can imagine, that was such an awesome feeling, and also a big responsibility to
Sure.
create something and make him really feel in the same vein as this guy, but also he has this other personality that is, or this other characteristic that I loved putting those together. It's like doing mashups,
Yeah.
mashup songs or mashup shows, or it
Yeah.
was a really cool
Yeah. Well,
feeling.
and like you said, he had such a small part, but he has become, or that
Yeah,
lifestyle, the
yeah,
Mandalorian, they
yeah.
have become such a big part now, in this universe, from that
Yeah.
one figure, and those few lines and what he did, it was huge from those three films. And I also think that they did that with Darth Maul as well, which was
Hmm.
really cool, because again, here's this incredible character that we've never seen before, and then he's gone, you know
Right.
and then so when Clone Wars came out and they brought him back, I was like, oh my god, this is
Yeah. Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
And sneaking him in Solo, and just
Yes. That
again,
moment was great.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's what's really cool about these characters, that those two specifically, because the other ones, yeah, we love them and they have huge parts, but
Yeah.
those two in the movies had little spots and became
But they were so
huge.
dramatic.
Yes.
Yeah, they're so dramatic in their appearance, that and in their voices and their performance, that it just felt so, I want to know more about this character. Because I don't know. there's something that I just wanted to bring up is that the something I learned working with Dave Filoni, he told me this, that is that the and I never thought of it this way before. Um, the live action is the true stories. The animated stories are stylized retellings of actual events that took place in this universe. Okay. So when we see these characters appearing in animation, and we're seeing them for the first time in animation, but then when we see them in live action, sometimes like, oh, it's not exactly like they were
Right.
in the cartoon, and
Right.
but that's because this is what they actually look like. This is actually how they act, and the cartoons are a stylized retelling of actual events that took place. So anyway, I thought that was a really cool way to understand or have that point of view of when we see them in live action. This is how they really are, and it's
Right.
they really would relate to other characters and how they would really look and stuff. Anyway, I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah. And
It's to me, it's like the movie, the Joaquin Phoenix movie, Joker, and also the Batman
mhm,
with Robert Pattinson. Those feel to me, they feel like the real story that all of the stylized stories that we see,
right.
that those are based on. To me, it feels like,
Yes.
wow, this is like, they're not legendized, they're not over
Right.
stylized costumes and stuff. They're just like the what if those were the real stories that everything else was based on? All the crazy, visuals and stuff were based on in cartoons and stuff. Anyway, I just thought that was
That's a
because
cool
I think we,
analogy. Yeah, it's
yeah,
a
like
awesome analogy. And I
it
think
makes
is
you
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, it makes you wonder about history. Like, how much of history have we, where you start out with good people who have good intentions, and then two, three, 1,000 years later, 200, 1,000 years later, whatever, that maybe we might have legendized some of their, but it started out, there was a true story there, and then you think of like the Santa Claus story, like
Right.
how that was probably a real person, a human being, and then it sort of like embellished and grew into this
Right.
magnificent magical story when it's really it was just a guy.
Yeah.
I think anyway, I really love that kind of storytelling.
Yeah, and I think again, like you said, they do such a great job with that, and even like the Cad Bane thing. I know people were like, "Oh, it doesn't look like the animation," but again,
Yeah.
that's the real person there. That's
Yes.
who we're looking at is that Cad Bane. So again,
Right.
if you step back from that a little bit, and that's sort of how I look at it. People always say, "Oh, well, what'd you think about the last movie, or what'd you think about the last three, or this or that."
Yeah.
I'm a big enough fan and love this universe so much that it's okay. There's nothing I can do to change it. That's what's come out. There's some things
Yeah.
that maybe I don't agree with or thought maybe I would have maybe changed it or hoped it would have gone a different way. But the
Sure.
the stuff that's out there, I'm enjoying because it's still coming out. And all these live
Well,
action things. Whether they look exactly like the cartoon or this or that, it is still
yeah.
an awesome story.
Well, yeah, and that's the key thing, is that it's an awesome story. When you go to a state fair or amusement park or something, and they do a caricature of you, that
Right.
doesn't. I mean, it looks kind of like you, but you are what you look like.
Yeah.
So when we see stuff in live action, I'm kind of really liking that we're seeing what real things might look like. But maybe this wouldn't be as exciting or interesting if we didn't have all the stylized, crazy visuals of Batman past, or Superman past, or even Joker's past. But anyway,
Well, and you're building on that. They're building on that. So I think that's, like I said, that's a great analogy to bring
yeah,
to bring that to fruition so that we all get to see what the real thing is.
yeah,
So I know we gotta get wrapping up here. So one more thing I want to ask you. What was your
yeah,
favorite moment on set? Do you have a favorite moment since you've been, doing the TV or even just, being in any of those costumes?
yeah. I would have to say, I mean, it's a toss up between flying the ship and having the shootout in the episode where all the Mandalorians come and rescue the main character,
Okay.
because we had a shootout in that street. All the bounty hunters were closing in on him, and just because, like, as just a childhood nerd, they were so fun to do, to what it felt like reenacting stuff that I had imagined in my head from, as a kid, what I would do if I was in Star Wars. That's what it was. Um, but flying the ship, I've told the story, I think, a lot, but that all the switches worked and everything. Not only was it a practical cockpit with functional everything, but also it was set in the volume, which is this digital screens that surround the sets, and out there was space. And so I'm looking out a real cockpit out of windows, real windows, and I'm surrounded by space, and all the stars are just kind of like floating, like this. And then when I say, uh, jumping to hyperspace now, like all the stars, stretch to infinity, just like in the films.
That's
And
awesome.
yeah, that was just the coolest moment, mostly because I was so excited the night before I couldn't sleep. And so I just was like, it was like the biggest Christmas morning ever
That's
as a Star
awesome.
Wars fan. Yeah. Thanks.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for being on and taking the time to talk to me and everybody else out here. And I just really appreciate you being on here and talking with us about this Star Wars universe. And hopefully everything will start moving along soon, and everybody will
It
get
will.
back to working and stuff. And we look forward to
It
that as well.
it will. Thanks. And Ron, I just want to say thank you so much for having me, but also thank you for doing this, for continuing to, talk about not only the stories and the characters, but also the work, that we're doing. And here's the thing about that other stuff, and I'll just leave it on this, is as actors, a very small percentage of all actors are the famous ones. The ones who, um, and that are, very, very successful. Uh, about 90% of all actors are people who go to work, and they do their work, and you never hear about them. But they're able to make a bit of a living. And I'm not talking about like Olympic-sized swimming pools, living in Malibu living. I'm talking about regular living in the city or in the suburbs, whatever kind of a living. And um, we're not asking for tons more money. What happened was, we get paid on the day, and then when the show airs, you get a little bit of what's called residuals. That's a
Sure.
residual income. Okay, so when the studios went to streaming, and they just so it's so fast they went to streaming. Um, it was a risk, and they lost a lot of money, because instead of one person paying for a ticket, I mean, instead of each person paying for a ticket to see your film, now one person's paying for it and everyone else in the house is watching it, which, that was the risk that they took, right? So they lost a bunch of money. And instead of saying, well, we'll pivot and do something else, or maybe we'll charge for a season or whatever, they said, nope, we're going to keep doing it. And everyone who's making the shows and the films, we want you to keep making it, but we want you to make it for, we're going to take away all the residuals. So you're going to make it for like a third of what you were making it for. So if you're doing your job and your boss comes to you and says, hey, we decided to give everything away for free, so we don't have anything, we have very little money to pay you, but we still want you to keep coming to work every day. You'd be like, oh, I'm going to go work somewhere else. But unfortunately, in this industry, you can't just go to another industry,
No.
and keep making these films and TV. So we're not asking for a bunch more money. We're just asking for the money back that just go back to the way that we were
That it
doing it, and
was.
keep
Yeah.
paying us the way that we were, have been doing it for a long time. Um, and the other part of it is the AI part is, you know, it takes a human heart and a mind to write stories and create characters that make you feel something. Because when you go to a store, when you go to watch a film and you go home and you're like still thinking about it, like whether it's I don't know, Tom Cruise action movie, or maybe
Right.
it's a mystery or something, whatever. And you're thinking about it, or maybe you're in it and you're so emotional in the scene that you start to, get emotional about it. Or maybe you really hate this character because he's so bad. You know, that takes a human heart who is drawing from either experiences or things that they've wanted to tell. Same thing with I would love it if the CEOs were like, if we said to them, "Hey, we're just going to get a computer to do your job. You're fine. We don't
Right.
need to pay you. We don't need to pay you to do that. We got a computer to do it. It's fine." Actually, it's more likely that we could get a computer to do a CEO job than
Right.
a computer to do,
Yep.
what we're doing. Um, but no, they wouldn't like that. So, we feel the same way. We wouldn't like a computer to take over our jobs, and
Yeah. Well, and I don't
especially,
think a computer can take over what you do or what you bring to these characters. Again, like I
right.
said, I think, sure, you could put me in a costume, you could put anybody in a costume, but the person that's in that costume, if they're not portraying that creature or that droid or whatever it is,
Hmm.
to make us feel something. Like I said, I mean,
Yeah.
you make us feel something. You rehearse that goldenrod, and when we see you move or any of these creatures, it's just a really cool thing, and nothing can replace that, and I think it stinks that you guys,
Nothing
are,
can
are
replace
being
it to that quality. Thank you for
right.
saying that. Not to that quality. You could put anybody in a costume. They might not be a good performer, and then you would see that.
Absolutely.
If you have, a guy who says to the computer, "All right, take this animation set, put it on this model, and use this voice, and go." Like, it's remember when we saw films that were all green screened, and they all characters that they were still hand animated by characters, or I mean, artists, but it felt like, oh, this is not real.
Yeah.
It's not like relatable. And so then people start to not like those kind of stories. People like stories that are written by, that they know there's a heart behind it.
Yeah. And there's a
So
heart behind that character too, like yourself,
yeah,
or in that creature, which I
yeah.
think, like you said, there's so many people out there that do that and do that well, and we're able to reap those benefits, and it's unfortunate of what's going on with technology, which again, it's good for, technology is good, yes, but there's some
Yes.
other things that it's not good for, and it's very similar in the music industry. When you bought CDs and records, it was a whole different thing than, okay, let me just download this song, let me download this album.
Or let
you
me
know
just or let me just sample something that a computer did,
right.
and have a computer sing the song, and have a
Right.
computer sample from stuff we've heard before. I mean, like, yeah, you could do that, but if you want quality
Yeah.
and you want to be the number one film or the number one TV show, use human beings.
Yeah. And that
Um,
again, because you have that heart, and that heart comes
yeah,
out, I think, through that,
yeah.
which is pretty
If you
cool.
wanted to interview a person, you
Right.
wouldn't want to interview a computer generated version of
Right.
some rant.
Yeah. This is
Anyway,
much more
thanks.
fun with me and you here.
Right, right. So, Ron, I really appreciate you doing the show, and I think it's going to be great. I love all of your fandom behind you there.
Thanks.
We're same. So,
Awesome.
I really this has been a lot of fun. So, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you. And that'll wrap up this episode with Chris Bartlett. Please continue to like and subscribe to this channel. We'll be really appreciative of that. And until next time, may the force be with you, and we'll see you on the next Star Wars Jedi Chat.